I'd been seeing a friend off at a rail station in Cambridge in the UK, and so I stepped back to climb off the train. And as I did, the doors closed, the automatic doors closed on my coat. Now, it was a very thick sheepskin coat, so I couldn't pull it free. It was trapped. So I started banging on the windows, carried on shouting, nothing happened. And I looked into the eyes of my friend, Anna, who was the other side of the glass, and I just saw absolute horror in her face. And I figured at that point, this is it. I'm going to die. I was literally looking death in the eyes for the first time in my life. So the train started to pull out, the engines roared, I remember feeling every single gear change as it pulled along, and I lost my footing. It started going really fast, and I got dragged along the platform, and underneath the actual wheels, it was very violent and horrific and terrifying, of course. And I was fully conscious throughout the whole of this ordeal, and I just kind of was determined to hang on in there. I went into fight or flight mode, and I decided to fight and remain conscious throughout the whole ordeal. I was finally thrown down in between the tracks as the train was still speeding on. It was a very long train, and I'd survived by a miracle. The emergency guys arrived really quick, actually, because there was a small hospital around the corner. So they jumped down onto the tracks and started cutting through my clothes, got me into an ambulance. And I remember the doctor saying, look, the place around the corner we can get you there, but the one that's going to really save your life is a 25-minute drive. Can you do that? And I said, yeah, let's go. So we sped off down the highway with the sirens going. We arrived at the hospital, and there was a whole team of medics waiting there, doctors and all sorts. And I didn't know what they were talking about. It was all science to me, of course. So I knew that the whole thing wasn't over yet. I'd seen the extent of the damage to my arm. My arm had been cut from the elbow down, and I was losing copious amounts of blood by this stage. My family arrived. I remember they came in. The surgeon said, look, we're going to wheel you into theatre soon to work on you, but would you like to see your family first? And I said, yes, please. And so they all came in. I remember seeing my friend Anna sat right at the back of the emergency department, and I said, look, can I speak to her? We'd just been through this awful thing together, and I need to talk to her. I suddenly got this very intense connection with her after what we'd just been through. So she came over, and her head was going from side to side, and she said, I can't believe you survived this. I saw you go under, and they announced that you were dead. And so I know. And it was at that point that I left my body. I left the drama of the hospital, the intensity of it all, and the pain, the sheer pain that I was going through. And I was suddenly in this beautiful, darkened space. At first, it felt like it was a small space because I couldn't see anything. Then I was suddenly aware that there were like these pulsating colours that were almost greeting me and making me feel safe and calm. Because I figured at this stage that I hadn't made it. I thought, well, I must be dead now, and this is clearly it. This is death. And I had no sense of fear. I had no sense of wanted to resist it or fight it. It's not like I wanted to die, but after the state my life had been in and the awful nightmare I'd just been through, it was great just to feel no pain and to feel safe. And so I went with it. And these pulsating colours were like ambers, golds, greens and yellows, and they slowly pulsated, and I just felt, right, I'm going to lay back. And I realised then I was no longer laid on the hospital trolley, the stretcher that I'd been brought in on, but I was now laid out on a huge rock, and it was like a granite sort of surface to it. It was the best way I can describe it is almost like a medieval altar that you may see in illustrations, and it was very comfortable to lay out on. And I looked down because I wanted to check my body to see if I, what the state of my body was in. And I realized I was no longer clothed. I was covered in this blue satin, silky colored material that made me feel very safe again. And I realized that there were no wounds. There was not even a single scratch or scar to my body. Everything was just complete. So that was reassuring. And I laid my head back and closed my eyes. And as I laid there relaxing, I could suddenly see light coming through my eyelids. And so I opened my eyes. And when I looked up, there were three very bright white, well, there were like three grids of white lights coming in, and they were slowly closing in on me. And these three grids of white light were like so intense that normally the human eye wouldn't be able to take that kind of brightness. But in this realm, it was possible. It was possible to look into that light. So I kept looking, and I couldn't stop looking at it, actually, because I knew that there was more than just light coming from it. I felt there was a healing power that was healing the trauma that my body had just been put through, this awful nightmare that I just had to endure. And so I closed my eyes and just went with this sensation of this healing balm. And as time went on, I suddenly experienced the sensation of somebody being there. It's like if you're taking a siesta and you close your eyes and somebody walks into the room, you're aware, aren't you? It's like an animal instinct. And so I opened my eyes and looked up, and just at my feet was this person with this pure white blonde hair and the skin that was radiating light from within, wearing like a very simple contemporary black t-shirt. And I just knew this person. There was an instant familiarity, but I couldn't figure where from. It's like that thing, sometimes when you go to a party and you meet somebody and you've never met them before in your life, but you feel like you've known them really for a lifetime, and they say the same thing back. So it was like that with this person. And I kept saying, I know you. I know your face. Where do I know you from? And this person kept smiling back with me with a reassuring smile and said nothing. Anyhow, I laid my head back again and continued to sort of bathe in this beautiful light. And then I felt the presence of more people had arrived at the scene. So I opened my eyes, and either side of me were two female forms had appeared. And this time, the girl to my right was very European, with dark skin and beautiful long brown hair, and again wearing a very simple contemporary brown dress. Whereas the girl to my left was she was wearing a more traditional sort of white dress, and she was more of Indian, Asian, American, Indians, maybe Brazilian, I don't know, sort of appearance. And they both had their hands slowly hovering over my body. And as their hands kind of went over the contours of my body, it's like they didn't actually touch it, but the energy that was coming from their hands was just so powerful. And it was a beautiful energy of love that I'd never felt before in my life. It was all the feelings of love that I'd received throughout my life, whether it was from my mother, my siblings, my lovers, even my pet cats or dogs or whatever. It was all those different sensations of love all encompassed into one. And it was so powerful. So I closed my eyes and I just really sort of allowed myself to be open to this energy that was coming from their hands, because I felt that they were now going from just beyond healing, the trauma of my body. They were going deeper. They were healing my soul. They were like peeling off all the different layers of baggage that I carried throughout my life, that we all talk about, that we all talk about carrying, sort of history, whether it's things that happened in our childhood or even in our early adult years or whatever, and each layer that was being peeled off, I felt lighter, and I felt that they were getting down to the pure essence of my soul. And I'd never experienced this before in my life. I'd never experienced that moment of a completeness that I was feeling. it was just absolutely beautiful. Then I realized that time wasn't. There was no sense of time. Time wasn't existing at all in this realm. There was no sense of past or future. I'd spent so much of my life before concerned with that, and all of a sudden now here I was, just in the present moment. And then I started to think about my family, because they'd all been pretty traumatized. My mother had been in tears, I remember, by the whole shock of it all. And I edged my way over the side of this huge rock, hoping to see them. And when I did, I looked down, and I couldn't see them at all. But what I did see was this incredible, awe-inspiring sight. It was a huge waterfall of stars, and this waterfall of stars was something like the size of Victoria Falls or Niagara Falls, but instead of billions of tons of water cascading over the edge, it was billions of sparkling stars just falling over, and shooting stars flying over the top, and I thought, wow. And I tried to edge my way over and look down as far as I could. And the more that my eyes started to adjust to looking down, the further I could see, and I started to sense that I was looking through one galaxy into another. I was looking into all these beautiful colors of nebulas, the forms like I'd never ever seen in my life before, because I'd shown no interest in astronomy whatsoever. To me, the universe consisted of what I looked up in the night sky, just blackness and stars sparkling. But no, these were amazing colors that were just all forming in all these beautiful nebulas. So I pulled myself back and I thought, you know what, I'm not in the small darkened room or whatever that I figured I was at the start. I was now aware that I was in the universe itself, and that I suddenly felt this sense of being a part of the universe, and that universal energy was just so wonderful and again awe-inspiring and making me feel even more complete. So I pulled myself back over, and it's odd because I didn't feel the sensation of like, oh my goodness, I can't see my family, and worrying about them. I remember feeling, oh well, I'm sure I will see them at some point, and if I don't, they're going to be experiencing all these beautiful wonders themselves before they know it, And so I was quite happy with all that, which is very unlike me of old. Me of old, I carried a lot of guilt and shame in my life, and I would have felt guilt before. So all that had gone, all that was dispersed, and I lay back and I continued to go with this healing energy that was coming from all the light and from these beings and from the grids. Then I felt this energy of healing that was coming from them. It had been more intensified. I felt like every single molecule of my body was starting to vibrate with this feeling of unconditional love. And I thought, what's going on? What's happening there? So I lifted my head and I looked, and just beyond the being of light stood at my feet in the black t-shirt. I could see a huge tunnel of white light, and this tunnel of white light was surrounded by all these very dramatic flames that were slowly circling around. It was something that normally I would have been scared of. That would have been a normal instinct. But in this realm, there was no sense of fear, and I felt nothing but trust and nothing but awe. Well, I felt absolutely like the love that was coming from this white light was just. It was more than the light I'd seen from the grids of light or the light beings. This was God. This is what I was being told. This is God. This is not the usual image of God in a human form that most faiths, whether it's Christianity or what have you, there's normally a human form attached, but no, this was God in the form of this huge white tunnel of light. And I just felt at that moment, I remember laughing to myself with this knowledge, because this was the most profound thing I'd ever encountered in my life. And it was at that point of beauty and knowledge that I suddenly came crashing back into my body. I was back in the hospital. I was like gone from all that peace to the the screaming lights of the fluorescent strip and the noise of the hospital, and all the pain came rushing straight back through me. And yeah, there I was back.
Well, David, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions now. So you said that you saw that light and tunnel and you felt or you knew that that was God. How did you knew that?
Because I was receiving telepathic intuition, information throughout that was helping me to understand what was happening. That's how I felt safe, basically. And but that message became the most profound and clearest that I was being told, that this is this is love. This is the love and source of God that you're feeling there, and you're being given all that love, and you're being completely immersed in it.
I assume and pretty much know that you never felt such love on earth, and it's impossible to feel this kind of powerful love here on earth. But over there, because you
Exactly.
have
Yeah.
no body, it's very organic and you can feel it deeply.
That's very true. But also, our lives, especially now, in the 21st century, are so blurred by everything that's going on around us, technology and all sorts, that we've got further and further away from nature, and further away from remembering that we are animals and that we are connected to the universe. Everything else in the animal kingdom, right down to birds and insects, they still connect with nature. I can hear the rain's just suddenly started now, and and we've forgotten that. And so, in this realm, I didn't have all that sort of blurred confusion. My thinking mind stopped working. There was nothing to do with the thinking process. Everything was coming from an authentic me, as it were. It's interesting because, well, I come back from this near-death experience, and I felt fully charged with all this beautiful love, and it was still there, very predominantly within me. When I was in hospital, my family and friends would come and visit, and they would all comment. They would all say, you just kind of like, we've never seen you look so well. We were expecting to see the worst. Yes, you've got tubes and wires coming out of you, but you're just radiating, and you're animated, is what is one of my friends said. And it's just when I did come out of hospital, yeah, I did. I wanted to be close to nature. I mean, I've moved recently. I now live very much off grid. I'm very close to nature, and I love it because I'm loving sort of the sensing the vibration of nature even closer
Right.
to me, and I feel even more attuned with the universe.
How old were you when you got this near-death experience?
I was 46 when I had it.
46
Yeah, I was
already. Okay.
46 when I was the
So
NDE. Yeah.
you changed right away after your NDE, like your friends and your family said, wow, you glow and you're so changed. You changed right away, or it took you some time, like gradually?
No, I changed right away, because I remember waking up after the operation. I'd been under for about 8 hours, and I woke up in this. They'd given me my own room in the hospital because of the severity of it all. And I remember my sister came to visit me the very next night, and she came in with a friend. And I remember that it was a really beautiful moment. They came in, and they both commented on how peaceful the room felt when they came in. And we had this conversation, and they were the first ones to say, "My goodness, you're glowing! You just look amazing," and stuff. And it's a strange thing, because yeah, physically I was just in pain, and yes, of course, I had to, my mind was dealing with the trauma of going under a train, because that's a huge thing to go through. But I was far more sort of focused on what had just happened to me, this whole experience that I knew nothing about. I knew nothing about near-death experiences, so I was just really keen to find out what had happened. But not only that, I was keen to share it with everyone. I thought, I've got to tell the world about this because I didn't know if it had happened to anybody else, you know. And I thought people need to know that the beauty that waits for us all.
Yeah, but when did you start sharing this experience? You were afraid to share it? Maybe that people would think that you're crazy, they may lock you up or something? Or you started telling
No,
people right away about it?
I didn't feel any sense of I thought if people think this is crazy, that's okay. You know, that's their take. I mean, I didn't expect everyone to believe it, but I was very keen to tell my family and my close friends anyhow. And I told my sister first because I'm very close to her. Then it took me a week to tell my parents, and that was because they're both Christian, and they were like, I thought it's probably going to sort of like jar with their teachings from the church,
Yeah,
and I really wanted them to get it, you know. But they did. They got it, you know. My
they got
mum
it.
turned around afterwards and said, "We know, David. We know." And I said, "How do you know, Mum? Maybe it's a mother's instinct." But she said, "This." There you go. She said, "Whenever we walk in and we leave this hospital, and we both turn around to each other and say, he looks amazing. He's just like looks so peaceful, and he's
Yeah,
giving." Energies, love out to everyone, even the nurses who were trying to tend over him, you know, and so they could see that there was a shift, particularly because my life had been in such a bad way and they were all worried about me. They were worried that my life was going through
yeah.
such a diversity. I mean, I'd started drinking heavily up until, you know, that point because you know that's a lot of it was to do with because the way you picked up work on construction sites in London was
Yeah,
to go to the local bar where all the
yeah.
guys worked, you know, and hustle for work. So it didn't help me at all. You know, that I was going there to try and hustle work, and I would probably end up blowing all my wages.
Yeah, because you came back a different person. You were filled with light, and the people can feel that right away because you are in this different vibration. You are in a higher vibration and a love vibration. And people always
Yeah,
earn for love. That's something that they earn the most is love. And when they were in your presence, they felt that vibration of love. They
yeah,
said, "Oh my God, what's going on here? What's happening? Something
yeah.
unusual is happening here."
That's well said. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's
So, how, David, how your life changed after this incident?
well. The first thing that I noticed was I was becoming a lot more creative than I'd ever been in my life before. You know, I'd never been given that sort of window. And suddenly I decided I wanted to do a painting of what I'd seen in the afterlife. This was in hospital. And I've never attempted anything like that before. And when I started this painting, I wanted it to be a big dramatic scene like the big Renaissance paintings that you see in the Vatican in Rome, you know, and I did. I started painting, and I couldn't stop, and I was producing work that I never thought I could ever produce in my life. It was like I was channeling energy. I was being given a crash course on how to develop skin tones using different colors to bring light and what have you. So that was the first stage of the biggest change of my life and then I started writing music as well. You know, all this came about was because I'd found a spiritualist church that I wanted to walk through the doors of and speak to them once I was well enough to see if they could help me put together what had happened because I thought they would, and of course they did. They said to me, "Oh, you had a near death experience," and when I was in that church, I was still, you know, I was still recovering physically from the accident, and they could see that. And they told me that they did spiritual healing, and some of those healers were clairvoyant, and they give short messages afterwards. Um, they started saying quite a few of them independently that we're seeing. Why am I seeing Wagner and Beethoven and violins and all sorts of? And I said, I've no idea. Then one of them said, the guides that are healing you are saying that you're going to write a piece of music about your near-death experience. So that's what I did. I started writing. I thought it was going to be a song, like you know, because I thought I got no more. I can't write for orchestra. I can't read or write music. But suddenly, this piece of music that I was trying to work on, I just got an old synthesizer, an old a synthesizer that I got out the loft, and a little tape recorder that my dad gave me, and that's all I got. And suddenly, I was writing a symphony for orchestra, and I'd become friends with a cellist from the local orchestra, and we used to meet for coffee. And I told her what I was up to. I said, I'm writing this piece of music, and she said, oh, maybe we could perform it in the orchestra. And I said, that would be amazing. So my brother said to me, look, he knew more about all this kind of stuff than me, and he said, you need to get a laptop, and you need to get an app which will transpose what you're playing on your musical keyboard into music notation, because that's what an orchestra needs. He said, I've got an old one that you can have. So he gave me his old laptop, and I started to work and get it, and I printed off the different bits of score. They agreed to do it. And I remember I turned up at the first rehearsal, and I was, part of me was confident, but part of me was also quite sort of nervous as to whether this was going to work. And I remember the conductor's baton going up, and as it came down, those first few chords that I had put together on that little cheap synthesizer were now being performed by the orchestra, and it worked. It was just, wow, it was better than I figured. It was like this huge 3-dimensional stereo, it was just incredible. And so that concert happened, and there was a lot of interest. Suddenly the media started to get involved, and then the BBC heard about it, and they said, we want to come down to the rehearsal and speak to you. I said, great. So the concert sold out 2 weeks in advance. So my very first debut symphony was a sellout concert. So from then on, I started getting, more and more people sort of get in touch. And basically, those two elements of my life have given me more scope. They've opened me up spiritually, because creativity is such a spiritual process anyhow, that you know that you need to be able to connect. You need to switch off the thinking mind and the thinking thought process, and not allow that to take over the process of creativity. So that helped me.
Yeah. So you suddenly became a creator like God. So maybe God wanted to create through you. Maybe that was the purpose, to send you back. They said, you know what? Let me give him an assignment. He's going to become an artist. He's going to, like they say somewhere in the Bible and the church, they say, praise my name, praise my name. It doesn't have to be like singing, saying, God is glorious, but you praising God's name through your creation, through your music, through your paintings.
That's beautifully said. Yeah, I agree with that as well. It's true. I never used to follow Christianity or have any interest in the Bible, but now I keep hearing phrases that Jesus spoke in the Bible, which I can totally align with, and that's something along those lines. I can't quote this properly, but there is a line that says something like, that the light of God is within you.
Right.
And that's absolutely true. So that's going along with what you just said there, And so I believe that anyhow. Everything I do now, right, when the concert sold out, for example, there was no sense of me of old. There was no sense of ego taking over, thinking, hey, I'm going to be a huge star. It was more like, great, the energy of God, the energy of what had happened to me is now coming through an orchestra, and it will, and all the people in this room will be able to get it. And that's all. That was my quest, and still is. It's still my mission. Is to be able to reach as many people as possible to try and get this across.
I'm going to ask a question here, David. It's a little off topic because we've been talking about God and heaven, but I want to come back to your accident. How did you feel when you were under that train? That must be a horrible experience. What were your feelings when you were being dragged under the train?
It's strange because it was like time had stretched. It like it expanded. It hadn't slowed down. There wasn't slow motion. I remember just as the train was about to pull out, I suddenly had this thought came into my head. I'd seen a news item a couple of weeks previous about a small child being thrown from an apartment block and how that child had survived because infants don't tense up like we do as adults. So I thought, right, relax when you go under. Just remember that. And not only that, I continued with that thought process. I remember once I was actually thrown to the ground in between the rails, I remember thinking it's not over yet. Part of the undercarriage could hit me. Think of the 007 movies, think of Indiana Jones, all those action hero films and what they would do now. So I was thinking it through almost quite sort of kind of calmly. And it's interesting because I saw an interview with this guy called Dr. David Eagleman, and he's a neuroscientist, and he talks about that, and he said that actually happens with people when they're facing a sort of a life-threatening ordeal. That he said that it's almost like the mind, if you like, the way he described it, it's like going from a VHS camera to a cinematic sort of wide-angle screen, and not only visually but hear more. I was aware of everything more, so I became more like an animal. I became more aware of everything that was going on.
Yeah, that's similar to people. Like sometimes people are about to have an accident and everything slows down and they can see everything in a slow motion. Like you said, the time slows down. Maybe you was not in slow motion, but you were more in the present, I would say.
I was in the present, and again, this whole thing of time. Because I remember, because the UK Rail Police did a huge inquiry on all this, and I asked them the question. I said, "How long did it take from the train pulling out, and me going under, and then the train continuing on?" And they said it was 13 and a half seconds, which is nothing, but that felt like minutes. That's there's no way I could have crammed all that information into my mind in 13 and a half seconds, but I did. And so it's incredible how that does happen. And yes, you're right. I'm constantly seeing these things now, especially because I've done quite a few podcasts with other people who've had near-death experiences, and they talk about the same process that, I talked with somebody who had a head-on collision in a car, and she said, it was the same thing where it was almost like, she got time to see what was about to happen, even though that's instant,
Okay, but you didn't have a near-death experience when you were under the train. You have your near-death. You had your NDE when you were in the hospital already.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. It wasn't until I got to the hospital itself.
Okay, so you said that you had no sense of time at all. Now, if you would try to put it in a metric or human system, how long do you think you were there on the other side? I know it's a stupid question because there's no time.
It's not a stupid one. It's not stupid. Don't worry, everybody asks me that one. And the answer is, the simple answer is, it's very hard to try and say, it was like, it felt like 20 minutes or half an hour, because it didn't, because that was the whole beauty of it, that you just forgot about time. This whole process of time is just like, it just kind of, as I say before, right, my whole life before, I remember thinking to myself as I lay there in that realm, I thought, why did I spend so much time before, my life before, focused on the past? I was worried about past mistakes, opportunities I'd missed, or if I wasn't doing that, I was focused on the future, worried about where my life was going to go. I was about to lose my apartment. I was about to be evicted. So, and I realized I was never in the present moment. So I just kind of like realized the importance of being, and I still do. I still think that we all need to try and be in the present moment, because we're not, especially when we're faced with such adversities and fears, that we face in our lives, whether it's day-to-day ones or switching on the news or anything, it's just, if we allow ourselves to go into the present moment.
We're going to come back here to the scriptures, and there is a saying, sit still and know that I am God. Be in the moment and experience me.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. So it was interesting because
That's interesting. You said, I like that expression. You said that you were there suddenly bathing in a beautiful light.
Sure.
That's such a beautiful set. I mean, how did you feel in that moment? What if you can describe that?
Well, it felt like I felt light. I felt a sense of lightness, not physically, but just within, that all those years of hurt that we all have, didn't belong to me, that they were all just surface issues. The real me, the pure essence of me was something that I actually felt comfortable with for the first time in my life. And so this healing light I felt was just doing that. It was almost like a sensation that it was just slowly, this light was just taking away all that stuff that was stuck to me, that was clinging to my soul, and body, and it was all just being dispersed, and that sensation of lightness was just incredible.
Yeah, so I would say you were taking a spiritual bath or a spiritual shower.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah. You said that you saw this person and you knew him or her. You just knew her. Who do you think that was?
Okay, well, what I realised that this person was neither male nor female. This person was androgynous, and I realised that what I was looking here was my higher self. This is we a lot of us use the phrase guardian angel. This person was my guardian angel, my gatekeeper. But this was my higher self. This was something that I'd never been aware of before, that I had a higher self. But suddenly, that's why there was the familiarity. That's why when I looked at that person, that I knew them. It was because it was me. It was a higher self that had been with me throughout the whole of my life and beyond. Before I'd gone into this body that I'm sitting in now.
Okay, David. Now, if people want to find more about you, about your work, about what you do, about your paintings, about your music, where they can go to? Do you have a website or a book or an album, if you'd like to share?
I do actually. I have a book that came out a couple of years ago, and it's called Shine On, and so that's available on Amazon worldwide. And my website is probably the first place to go to online if you want to look and see my paintings and see all my social media links. And that's called shineonthestory.com. And if you follow me on social media, the only reason I suggest that, if you're interested, is because you can see me updating on what's happening with my paintings and my music, and how what projects are coming along that are all related to the whole story.
Okay, one more question. I probably know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you for the viewers. Are you afraid of death?
No, I don't fear death. It's. I realised that straight away when I was there, that that the soul lives on. That the soul is too great a powerful an entity just to suddenly cease. Yes, the body switches off at death and slowly dies down, but the soul lives on. It's a very, very strong thing. I mean, I've realised that as well. I mean, I lost both my parents in the past 2 years actually, and as much as I miss them, obviously, and it was heartbreaking to lose them, I felt great in the knowledge that I knew that it wasn't the end for them. That it was only the next stage of their journey.
One more question, David. And what's your definition of freedom?
Oh, my definition of freedom is letting go of the thinking mind. Because the thinking mind is. We need our thinking minds, obviously, to sort of guidepost us through life, but we have to be careful that the thinking mind can become our enemy, And so it's just letting go of the thinking mind and trusting in the laws of nature, and trusting that we are animals, and trusting in the universe as well, because the universe wants us to move forward with it. It wants us to keep creating and keep recreating, and it wants us to love and be loved.
That's a very well said. I like that. The universe wants us to create and to recreate, and wants us to love and be loved. Thank you for watching About Freedom Show. I really appreciate you. Click on one of the videos below and don't forget to subscribe.